Welcome to Up One, the podcast where we take a deep dive into the science behind supplements, therapies, and diagnostics. I'm Sawyer Stone, your guide through the maze of health claims, here to ask the big questions.
And I'm Dr. Bill Andrews. With decades of experience in medical research, I've dedicated my career to uncovering the real science behind disease, aging, and human health. On this podcast, we don't just skim the surface of scientific studies. We conduct a critical meta-analysis, separating credible research from misleading conclusions.
There's a lot of noise out there, conflicting studies, bold claims, and endless marketing. Up One is here to cut through it all and bring you science-backed insights that you can actually trust.
We're talking prevention, diagnostics, treatments, and the big questions shaping the future of health.
If you're serious about understanding the science of health and longevity without the fluff, let's take it up one. All right, Dr. Bill, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's getting to the point where it's hot here in North Carolina. So the second you step outside, you're like cutting through some humidity and starting to sweat immediately. But I'm sure it's even hotter where you are.
No, actually, I'm almost at a mile altitude, so it's usually cooler here than the rest of the thing. In fact, I'm wearing a long sleeve shirt today because when I went out to walk my dog, it was cold. So
wow, I'm jealous of your altitude then. Well, Dr. Bill, the last time we talked about telomeres was our first episode. And we talked about telomeres and anti-aging. And I just kind of wanted to go back and pick your brain a little bit and what we can do practically to increase our longevity and live fuller and healthier lives. I think maybe you know just a hair on that subject.
Yes, it's my specialty. Yes, I can tell you, I can answer a lot of stuff about that. But telomeres always become the bottom line.
Can you tell the story really quick about what you told your dad when you were 9?
Well, when I was 10.
10, sorry.
Yeah, and it was my teachers sent me home with a note pinned to my shirt, and my father and mother opened up the note and it said, "Your son's very interested in science and medicine. You should nurture this." Now, my parents already knew that I was interested in things like astronomy and stuff like that because I had, the previous Christmas, had wanted a telescope for Christmas. And they got me what I would call a toy telescope, and I cried. I was not good enough for a telescope. So on Christmas Day or the day after Christmas, we went out for a drive at house sales or garage sales and found a nice 8-inch reflector telescope, which was, almost as big as I was. And that was the best thing that ever happened. So I'm out on the front lawn looking at Saturn and Jupiter and all kinds of stuff with this telescope, and I'm just addicted to it. And my father comes out to the lawn and says, "Bill, when you grow up, you should become a doctor and find the cure for aging." Then he says, "I don't know why nobody's done that yet." I was hooked on it since that moment because I thought, oh my God, this is something, boy, I'd really like to do. And I've been obsessed with it ever since then. So I could spend an hour talking about everything that ensued from there, but that answers the question about what my father said to me.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. No, I think it's a good perspective for all of our listeners to have about how dedicated you are to this specific subject. It's good.
Yeah.
All right. So along those lines about a big passion that you've had and you've had for like a decent amount of time, you've been running ultra marathons and big, huge races that are, at high altitudes or in extreme temperatures for a good amount of time in your life. Do you think that you wouldn't be able to do that at your age if you hadn't like really regulated and been pretty regimented on what you were putting in your body or what you're putting your body through?
Absolutely. I mean, I've been running my entire life. I mean, it's like I was the kid that was always yelled at for running along the pool, but my parents never did the yelling. They encouraged it. And then in high school, I was at a all-boys boarding school called Kate School, And every time there was meals, I would run from my dorm room to the cafeteria and back and forth. And everybody used to make fun of the fact that I never walked. I always ran. Um, so, but it was like when I was 10 years old, my father entered me into a 1 mile race because I was running all the time. And I ended up lapping second place twice. So it was like I knew I was into an endurance running, but I never actually focused on my diet for running. I mean, there were some things I'll come back to, but I was I was always saying to myself, "Don't smoke, don't drink a lot, don't do a lot of different things that are toxic to cells." Of course, I didn't know at the time that they were toxic to cells. I just knew that smokers and things like that were not as good at athletes as non-smokers. So, I decided I really liked this running. In fact, what I liked most about it was the adventure of running, uh, because most of my running was on trails and it's oftentimes off trail. I'm addicted to the idea of just running through a forest with no trail, and then figuring out how to get out of there one way or another. I'm really good. I've been in ultra marathons where everybody got lost, and I was the one that found our way home, that kind of thing. But uh, I so I was mostly doing like running on my own. I remember we lived in Lake Arrowhead, California, and one day my brother and I decided to run around Lake Arrowhead for fun, and everybody thought we were crazy, but it was fun. And that's so running has always been fun. The main things that I did besides real diet was I always made a point of having good physical therapists. I was always conscientious about what I eat and do while running. Okay, so, like carbs, electrolytes. I guess I learned that in high school. But I was, I listened to my coaches, and even when I wasn't competing in high school, because I competed in high school and college track and cross country. Um, but I just believed everything they told me. And I would say the first time I ever started really worrying about diet was when I was realizing that sometimes I get sick during races. And was it because of something I ate? So I did a big study on myself to find out what can I eat that doesn't cause me to get sick during a race. And I came up with fish and rice. Okay, so this is long before I was a vegan. Um, but I started making a point of always the night before a race having fish and rice, and I never got sick at races. But everybody's different, okay? I really didn't start really focusing on diet and stuff like that until I turned that magical year of 65 years old. That's the day everybody's supposed to retire, and I didn't feel like I was ready to retire. In fact, I just felt like I was just beginning in my endeavors. I ended up even breaking some world records after I turned 65. But I started really focusing on diet, and I decided that the most important thing was to be vegan, and I also cut out my oils. Okay, I did a lot of studying and reading on scientifically peer-reviewed studies, not just press releases and things like that. But I became a big fan of like Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, who had published a lot on the fact that oils, even olive oil, causes your collateral arteries to collapse.
We don't want
So
that.
I took oils out of my diet, and then I started realizing that there's a lot of inflammatory things in meats and fish and fowl and dairy, and so I decided to switch to plants to do that. But I got even more. So like when I turned 65, I started taking what are called ALCAT tests, ALCAT, and that's where I test my sensitivity to foods. And again, everybody's different, so I had to find out what am I sensitive to.
Yeah.
And so I started taking ALCAT tests, and I quit eating the foods that I was sensitive to. But one of the things I found out from the ALCAT test was that I was very sensitive to arachidonic acid, which is found in meats and fish and fowl and dairy, but not in plants. And so one of the things I did was became vegan for that reason. Inflammation Nation is a good book that talks about the arachidonic acid. And so I read that, and it wasn't peer reviewed, but it had a lot of peer reviewed studies that I was referred to in the book. I'm addicted to running because of the adventure, and I
Yeah.
wanted to make certain I could always do it. So I started really focusing on diet and stuff like that to make certain I could continue to run as long as I could.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then we got to go back to the
Okay.
Guinness World Records, or to the world records that were
Oh,
broken, because I just think that our listeners are going to be like, hello, can you tell us what those are?
well, first of all, I used to hold the world speed record for barefoot water skiing at
What?
74.93 miles per hour. But
Oh
I
my God,
remember,
how? That had to
but,
hurt your feet.
no, well, that was actually a big problem. In fact, I think I still hold the world record for that because uh, when I went to break my own world record, I did get very bad damage to my feet. And
Yeah.
the American Water Ski Association and the American Drag Boat Association changed the rules that you're not allowed to actually do it on your bare feet anymore. You had to wear wetsuit booties.
Yeah.
So right away, the world record went up to like 100 miles per hour because the wetsuit booties made it a lot easier. I think I might be the last person that actually did it really barefooted. But the thing that I was most shocked at when I think about those days, because it was always quarter-mile drags. There'd be two boats with skiers behind, and we'd all be escorted out to the starting line in uh, some other kind of small boat. And I was always surprised that all my competitors smoked.
Ugh,
And
yeah.
it was like we'd be going out and they'd be smoking a cigarette, trying to finish a cigarette before the actual race. And I thought that was so crazy. I mean, but I ended up lasting a lot longer than they did. Yeah, so that was one world record, but that really had nothing to do with diet. The other world records were
Wait, how old were you when that happened?
that was God, I think I was 20, so I was still
Okay.
young. Um,
Okay.
the That was 1971. The other world record was there's more than one, but was I ran more 100-mile races in 1 year than anybody, and that was
What?
and yeah, it was. I think I ran 11 100-mile races in 1 year, but it wasn't. I had no idea that there was any records or anything like that. It was just fun. I got so addicted to running 100-mile races because I have this strategy about running, uh, and that's keep it fun.
Yeah.
Don't worry
If
about
it's not
winning.
fun, don't
Just
do it.
it's not the destination; it's the adventure. I would love ultra marathons because I would go in the wilderness where nobody was there, and oftentimes they would have food drops and water drops by helicopter, and that was the only way you could get things. And my favorite races were the ones that nobody finished.
Right.
There's one race called the Barclays Marathon, which is a 100-mile race that something like only 5 people have ever finished. But I tried that 3 times. I never finished, but I had fun.
You had
I had
fun.
fun trying it. But yeah, so I just decided 1 year that I was going to, sign up for every 100-mile race I could. And when I got done that year, uh, somebody told me I had broken the world record for that. But I never thought anything except it was fun. I also got several awards called the Grand Slam of ultra marathon running, and the what was the other award called? The greatest race on earth, which was where I competed in certain marathons and ultra marathons, and I didn't even know those awards existed. But it was just fun. What I always say when I speak at conferences that deal with endurance sports: keep it fun, and then when it quits being fun, quit and save it for another day. And that goes not just for running, but bicycling, kayaking, uh,
Soccer,
anything that has to do
sports,
with endurance.
pickleball.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. I feel like I'm not a runner. I want to like run after a ball on a soccer field. I don't want to like just go running. But in 2019, I ran 13 5Ks. And I was like, at the end of 2019, I was like, I don't need to do this ever again. Just like
That's
wore
what
myself out on it.
sprinting, like 5Ks is really a sprint. Those things,
For you,
yeah,
some of
well,
us
yeah,
are struggling.
no, yeah, no, I go as fast as I can when I run a 5K, but they're just not as fun as there's no adventure in typical 5Ks, and
No,
so
it's
you
just
get burned out
overcast.
really fast. I've
Yeah.
never been burned out from running ultra marathons,
Okay.
and I keep looking for bigger and bigger adventures, and I'm not sure. My wife is also big into ultra marathons, and
Mm-hmm.
she's this like-minded with me. She just did the what is it called? The World Marathon Challenge, which is running 7 marathons on 7 continents in 7 days,
Insane.
and that included her first one was Antarctica.
Yeah.
I'm jealous because I've still never run in Antarctica and I never run in Africa. I've run in every other country, but not Africa or Antarctica. And now she's training to run next month on the North Pole. I'm going to take a ice cutter from Norway and spend a week cutting through the ice to get to the North Pole. Then everybody's going to get off the boat and run a marathon.
Does she
And
have to run with like snowshoes on, like snow spikes?
no. Well, she might be running with, excuse me, might be running with spikes, but it's kind of like hard packed stuff. The
Okay.
thing is that she has to run with a life preserver on because there's places where people can cave through into the cold water. And then there's
Sure.
also people out with rifles to prevent runners from being attacked by polar bears. So,
Oh my
I mean, that kind of stuff just makes me and my wife Molly just more anxious to do the race than ever because of the adventure kind of thing. It's like
God.
it
Yeah.
sounds like fun.
Yeah. I would do it for
But
the polar bears.
yeah, well, yeah. There's also some polar plunge that every runner is supposed to do. That's where they tie a rope around you and then you jump into the water and swim under the ice, and then they pull you back out again. And I think that's a little crazy, but Molly says there's no way she's not going to do it, just because it adds to the adventure.
God, tell her
Yeah,
to put on a wetsuit. I feel like I need a full wetsuit to get in my cold plunge, which is like 55 degrees. So get
I
her a
I,
wetsuit.
I touch my toe to cold water and I
Yeah.
freak out. No way.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if we're talking about diet and nutrients in conjunction with longevity and telomeres, are there any known dietary components or specific micronutrients that have a direct measurable effect on how telomerase activity or telomere length in human cells? Is there is there anything dietary that we can do to affect that? I think if we give a refresher to our listeners, the telomeres are the ride tickets. You have 100 when you're born, and then over time, or actually, you have 100 when you're born, or you have 100 when you start, and then
You
by
have
the time
100
you're
when you're
born, you have
conceived.
50
You have 100 when you're conceived.
conceived, and then 50 when
Okay.
you're born.
You have 50 when you're born, and when you get down to 0, you're dead. I mean, it's essentially, yeah, your cells lose the ability to function, you die. And
Yeah.
these ride tickets are found at the very tips of our chromosomes, and we can measure them. Yeah. There's a lot of things that can accelerate the use of those ride tickets or telomere shortening. They pretty much come out of the heading of any antioxidant or any free radical or any inflammatory thing. Anything that causes oxidative stress or inflammation will accelerate the rate of telomere shortening and accelerate the rate of aging. So, and that includes smoking. Smoking is both causes oxidative stress and inflammation. And I pick on smoking because it's one of the worst things people can do. You can always tell when you're like meeting with high school buddies and things like that, that high school friends that are 65 plus, you can tell who's been smoking their life and who hasn't just because of the accelerated aging that occurred. So recently, there's ways of lengthening telomeres. Okay. And that's like, especially this new product that just got launched that I invented called Telo-Vital from Touchstone Essentials. That contains turmeric. And in fact, turmeric is the most active ingredient. But what we discovered is that, the most the active component in turmeric is curcumin. Uh, and it turns out curcumin is an inhibitor of telomerase activity. Telomerase is an enzyme that lengthens telomeres, and telomerase isn't found in any cells of our body except our reproductive cells. So there's nothing anybody can do to harm their telomerase because telomerase isn't even produced in their cells. It's only in their what's called primordial germ cells that produce their children. And if they affected that telomerase, there's a chance that their children could be born with shorter telomeres than they have. So it wouldn't affect them, but it would affect their children. So this Telo-Vital contains turmeric without curcumin.
Oh,
And so what I always tell people is if you take Telo-Vital, try to wait 4 hours before or after you take Telo-Vital before you take your curcumin. Curcumin is actually a very good anti-inflammatory and antioxidant. And it's unfortunate that it also inhibits telomerase because it would have been
yeah.
nice to be able to leave curcumin in turmeric. But yeah.
Yeah.
So and that you mentioned pomegranates too. Pomegranates. So we tested close to 20,000 different plant extracts with our what's called
Crazy.
proprietary high throughput robotic telomerase mRNA PCR assay, which is probably a mouthful, but
Yeah, that is a lot of words.
that assay, we can test like 4,000 different plant extracts a day. And out of close to 20,000, we have found like 40 plant extracts that actually do induce the production of telomerase. And
That's great.
the top ones are combined into Telo-Vital. That just got launched a few weeks ago. I actually spoke at a conference in Austin, Texas. Yeah, that right
I was
there.
like, the camera won't pick it up, maybe.
Yeah.
There it
And
goes.
I religiously take that every day. And I believe it's one of the best things I could be doing for myself. But here's the thing. It's like it's not the only product on the market that promotes itself as lengthening telomeres. But it's the only product that actually demonstrates we show that we induce the production of telomerase, which is really the only way to lengthen telomeres. And all the other products that are claiming to lengthen telomeres, they're not actually lengthening telomeres. They're actually just changing the population of cells in the blood, which is where you usually measure your telomeres, or your saliva. They're changing the population so that the population now is made up of cells with longer telomeres, but there was no lengthening. Okay, the analogy that I really like when I explain this is if you have a company and you fire all the dumbest people in your company, the average IQ of your company goes up, but nobody got any smarter. Okay, same thing's true if you hired a bunch of geniuses. The average IQ of your company goes up, but nobody got any smarter. Okay, so in our blood, our cells in our blood are constantly changing. Okay, and so if you take a product that actually is at all toxic to cells, okay, the cells in your blood that have short telomeres are going to be preferentially killed off. Okay, because when your telomeres get really short, your cells become more sensitive to toxicity. So if the treatment that you're doing or the supplement you're taking is at all toxic to cells, your average telomere length is going to be higher because you killed off the cells with short telomeres, and therefore the average telomere length of the cells that are remaining is longer, just like the average IQ of your company increased by getting rid of the dumbest people. But the same thing is true in the opposite spectrum, is that if your product or treatment is immunogenic at all, or it induces some type of immune response, or like, let's say, inflammation, you're going to have cells in your bone marrow. And the cells in your bone marrow that are like stem cells for your immune system, they have long telomeres even when you're really, really old. Okay, they have long telomeres because they haven't gone through very many cell divisions to be where they're at. But now all of a sudden, an inflammatory response is inducing some of them to divide, and you uh, they divide just a few times and populate the blood. And as a result, that's the same as hiring geniuses in your company. You're now put cells with long telomeres. Now, so always ask these companies that provide these supplements and treatments, well, did you ever demonstrate telomerase expression? They say, well, yeah, lengthening telomeres shows that. And I say, no, it doesn't. There's other ways to lengthen telomeres besides, there's other ways to have longer telomeres without lengthening. And they say, well, no, we didn't. I say, well, why not? It's easy. It's really easy to check for telomerase activity. And they still say, oh, well, we didn't do it. But I read that as, well, they did do it. They did check for telomerase activity, but they couldn't get any detectable activity, and they didn't know why. But they thought, well, we lengthened telomeres, so let's just go with that. But the fact is that it's telling me in all these other cases that their products are toxic or inflammatory. They're not
Right.
lengthening telomeres. And in both cases, when you kill off the cells with short telomeres, other cells are going to have to divide to replace those blood cells, which is going to cause telomere shortening. So elsewhere in the body, like the bone marrow.
Yeah.
Or when you induce an immune reaction, even though those stem cells in your bone marrow have long telomeres, they get shorter, okay? And as a result. So these products aren't making you younger. They're making you older. And that's why I like Telo-Vital, is it's the only nutraceutical on the planet right now that actually does induce expression of telomerase. And that
great.
means that it is affecting our telomere lengths.
So is the Telo-Vital adding ride tickets or just prolonging the ride tickets that exist?
Well, it's adding ride tickets, but at the same time, ride tickets are also being removed, okay? Because
So like the defective ride tickets are being removed and the ride tickets that are working are being more supported.
well, there's no defective ride tickets, okay? So
Oh,
when the cell divides, the telomeres get shorter because it takes off a ride ticket. And then
I see.
a telomerase inducer like Telo-Vital will add ride tickets back. But I'd like to think of it like a tug-of-war. Okay, so you have shortening and lengthening going on at the same time. Well, so without taking a telomerase inducer, it's a one-sided tug-of-war. You have people in the tug-of-war pulling to shorten your telomeres. And that's what we all are. And through our whole life, this telomere analogy, this tug-of-war analogy works for just about everything. We're all declining as a tug-of-war. But in the case of telomeres, if we induce telomerase, we do add people to the other side of the tug-of-war. But they don't necessarily win the tug-of-war, but they do decrease the rate that the people pulling to shorten your telomeres shorten the telomeres. Okay, so the shortening, the rate of shortening decreases. So now there is no nutraceutical or even pharmaceutical on the planet right now that will lengthen telomeres, have a net result of lengthening telomeres. Okay, because if there were, we'd be seeing people get younger, and that hasn't happened. There's biomarkers of aging, but nobody's ever shown that reversing those biomarkers reverse aging. When I speak at conferences, I talk about the Betty White test, where we all know what aging is. We can look at photos of Betty White when she was 25 and 95, and we know which photo was taken first. There's no question about it, but we don't know exactly why we know that, okay? So, and maybe we'll never know why, but we know it. That's the whole point. So I always say, if somebody reverses a biomarker of aging, but they didn't pass what I call the Betty White test, they didn't get obviously younger, looking, feeling, or behaving younger, then there was no age reversal.
Right.
And so nothing actually lengthens the telomeres to the point that aging gets reversed. But that's my goal. I'm planning on continuing my research to find something where it does put more people on the side of the tug-of-war to lengthen telomeres and shorten. But that doesn't exist yet. But we are definitely putting some people on the other side, which is slowing the rate of aging down. And given telomere shortening without having a telomerase inducer, I can do the math and I can tell you that it's impossible to live longer than 125 years. And nobody has ever lived to be 125 years because none of us have the perfect lifestyle and perfect genetics. And so we are doing accelerated telomere shortening. But if we didn't have accelerated telomere shortening, we still are limited to 125 years. But I believe that anything you do to induce telomerase, to add anybody to that other side of the tug-of-war, is going to add extra years to your life. So you could possibly end up living longer than 125 years. And maybe in 50 years, we'll see that for a fact.
I want to be 125. Dr. Bill, can I ask you about how telomeres specifically function in different types of cells, like such as neurons or muscle cells, which have vastly different rates of division compared to like a skin cell? How is a telomere interacting with that science?
Well, let me talk about the neuron first. Neurons don't divide. I mean, they had divisions before they became terminally differentiated into neurons. But neurons are one of the most stablest cells in our body. Neurons can far outlive a human. And so there's never any fear of decline of neurons unless there's something like some toxin or genetic predisposition that affects neurons. But neurons, one of the reasons why neurons are so healthy is so neurons don't have telomere shortening because they don't have cell division, unless you use some really harsh free radicals or something that causes oxidative stress. But neurons have what I often call caregiver cells and bodyguard cells. Okay, that cells that really nurse them, take care of them. Okay, and those are called oligodendrocytes, and Schwann cells, both of which provide myelin to wrap around the neurons to protect them from things. And then other cells like astrocytes, which are really immune type cells that really protect neurons from any kind of like immune reactions, stuff like that. Now these obviously fail sometimes because people get dementia and other kind of things, but typically they're pretty good. But so they don't really have neurons don't have telomere shortenings, but the oligodendrocytes, the Schwann cells, and the astrocytes, they do have telomere shortening. So we have to maintain their telomeres, because if they suddenly get really short telomeres and go into a phase called senescence, the neurons lose their bodyguard cells and their caregiver cells, and then they can die too. And that's often what causes a lot of diseases like multiple sclerosis and CIDP and various forms of dementia. Okay, so on the subject of muscle cells versus skin cells, okay, we have to focus on the stem cells, okay? And you mentioned that skin cells divide more often than muscle cells do, but that's actually not the case. Okay, so when you look at stem cells, and stem cells of both skin and muscle, they both divide on average once a year. Okay, they divide to replace damaged cells that are damaged because of the normal wear and tear of normal bodily functions that are the frontline cells of that particular organ or tissue. Okay, so the reason why people think that skin cells divide so often is because once the stem cell divides, those daughter cells, then they divide, and then those daughter cells divide. So you got the 2, 4, 8, 16, 32 phenomena of making a tremendous amount of cells. But really, all that matters is what the telomere lengths in those stem cells were. Because those other cells, they divide, they senesce, but they die off, and then you still have your stem cell that has really only gone through one division. In the case of the muscle cell, they divide and they differentiate right away into muscle. There's not a lot of cell division. So You don't see a lot of that happen, but the stem
I
cells
see.
still divided the same number of times. And so now, so bodybuilding, bodybuilding. So you build muscle by damaging muscle cells and then having cell division come along to fill in the spaces that result from the damage. That's how your muscles get bigger. So bodybuilding does cause accelerated telomere shortening.
I see. Oh,
Now,
not good.
on that subject, so does microdermabrasion and immune boosters, because they all induce cell division, and cell division causes telomere shortening. But given that, I always say, what's the point of living a long time if you're not living? Okay.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, having more muscles than not having muscles makes living better. Okay. For a
Yeah.
lot of various
Yeah.
reasons. And doing microdermabrasion and on your skin, I mean, that really works. I mean, so it unfortunately it makes you look younger because of the an increased cell division, because microdermabrasion kills skin cells, and then that
Yeah.
induces stem cells to divide to replace those cells. And for a short period of time, that looks younger, but actually they're older, okay, because of the telomere shortening. And then
Yeah.
immune
Oh,
boosters are actually going to help you survive diseases. So that's something good too. But it's like, I always say, you know, have faith in the fact that I'm going to come up with a telomerase inducer that's going to lengthen all your telomeres.
I
Uh,
see.
and so whatever you're doing now, I say keep doing it if it makes you feel good, because I'll fix it later. It's just like
Okay.
I just got a little more research to do. Telo-Vital
Mm.
is the best you can do right now, but it's going to get better. And I have every intention of Touchstone Essentials being the company that's going to market any new discoveries that I make.
Well then, lucky them. Can I ask you, since we're talking about like bodybuilding specifically, and there's lots of protein involved in bodybuilding or building muscle in general, I would say. Every time I go to the gym after I leave like a weight class, my instructor's like, make sure you have protein. Make sure you have protein. Lots of water. Um, I know that you are vegan, and so you prefer a plant-based protein, but how does the body affect or react differently to a plant-based protein or a whey protein?
Well, it really should not be any effect at all. If the proteins, okay, so let me say that plant proteins, like if you were to take rice protein, okay, rice protein is almost 100% deficient of threonine, which is an amino acid. It's one of the essential amino acids. So rice protein all by itself is a terrible thing for you because you're missing an essential amino acid. Um, but there's several published papers that have been published on this, and so the critical meta-analysis of peer-reviewed studies is something I've looked at, and there's ways of mixing different plants to develop an amino acid composition that's identical to whey protein. Whey protein is considered the standard,
Yeah.
but the problem with whey protein is it's often contaminated with arachidonic acid. Okay, and so that's why I prefer plant proteins. But protein's protein. There's 20 amino acids. It doesn't matter where it came from. Once you have a solution of protein, if all the amino acids are there and they're all in the right proportions, it's just as good no matter what the source is. But the advantage of plant proteins is that you don't have the inflammatory components such as arachidonic acid.
Which is not causing oxidative stress in the body, which therefore makes you live longer.
The only protein that really troubles me is collagen. Okay, so collagen's become really popular lately. Okay, I take collagen every day. Okay, but it's not
Do you take a
really.
vegan collagen?
No,
Because
there
most
is no such
collagen
thing
is
as a
made
vegan.
from, I was
There's
going to
no
say.
such thing as a vegan collagen, and that's the problem. Okay,
Okay.
so. But collagen, you can get collagen from marine organisms, or you can get collagen from a whole bunch of other sources that are mostly animal. But so in all cases, when somebody drinks or a shake or something like that that's got collagen, and that's not really intact collagen. Okay, it's really a hydrolysis of collagen. So where the collagen has been broken down into small amino acids and peptides that like tripeptides. And there's one tripeptide in particular that's actually made up of 3 amino acids, which are glycine, proline, and hydroxyproline. So it's a glycine, proline, hydroxyproline tripeptide, 3 amino acids in a row. And that gets absorbed into your blood very readily, and then that binds to receptors on your fibroblast cells that cause your fibroblasts to start producing collagen and elastin. And unfortunately, one of the most important amino acids there is the hydroxyproline that is pretty much not found in plants. And so even though I'm vegan, I have to resort to my collagen coming from, I go with the marine collagen. And but it's still, I'm reducing my arachidonic acid as much as possible. But I think sometimes the pros outweigh the cons, and so I take the collagen from marine organisms. And it would be nice if we could figure out a way to find, or at least find a plant that produces hydroxyproline. But it would have to not just be hydroxyproline, because hydroxyproline doesn't actually integrate into collagen. So if you consume hydroxyproline, it would get degraded, but not used to produce collagen. It won't become one of the amino acids in collagen. Proline will get incorporated into the collagen, and then after it's incorporated into the collagen, then the body modifies it to make it into hydroxyproline. And so that's another big problem. But plants don't have the tripeptide that would induce your body to start producing collagen. And I would love to find ways of doing research to figure that out. And I am working with somebody in New Zealand right now, Christian Chase, who I think you know, to work on ways of inventing a plant-based collagen inducer. And actually, most of the work is on his part. He's come up with some ingenious ideas. And I look forward to that becoming a finished product, because that would be number one on my list of things to start taking. And I hope like Touchtone Essentials will then be marketing it too.
I'll put in a good word for you. Okay. So going back a little bit to our environmental elements and things like that we can affect on longevity, I'm trying to think, like, I guess I started, as a woman, you get marketed early for anti-aging or skincare, or like, you got to look young for, your rest of your life kind of thing. And so if we're thinking about affecting longevity in our teens or in our 20s, like what environmental elements are going to help with that? Like diet, should teens be taking Telo-Vital? Like, what is it I know exercise, but how do we keep everybody young?
Okay, so definitely everybody should be taking Telo-Vital. Okay, there's going to be FDA regulations saying that you have to be over like 18, I guess, and if you're pregnant, you shouldn't be taking it. But those are just playing it safe, okay? Because the FDA doesn't really understand the products as well as other people do, especially if they don't understand telomere biology as well as I do. But I personally think there's never a time when you shouldn't be doing whatever you can to protect your telomeres or lengthen your telomeres. Now, in your teens, the main things, you don't want to smoke, you don't want to drink excessively, you don't want to do these things because they accelerate aging. There's a lot of YouTube videos of me talking about how we age, and anybody can Google those and find those. But I talk about how our frontline cells, I used that term before, our frontline cells, every organ or tissue has cells that are called the frontline cells that are actually where all the action is. They're the ones doing all the work to perform the function. There's also reserve cells that are just sitting dormant inside that organ or tissue. But the frontline cells, just through the normal operations, more normal bodily operations of the body, they're suffering wear and tear, and they typically have a lifespan of only 1 year. Okay, well, you can accelerate that, especially by something like smoking or drinking. Let me use drinking as an example because I already talked about smoking. Drinking actually kills liver cells. Okay, everybody knows that actually, but it doesn't affect you when you're young because when you kill your liver cells, you have other cells, the reserve cells or stem cells. The reserve cells are progenitor cells and stem cells, not just stem cells. But those cells will divide to replace the killed frontline cell. Okay, and so you're fine. Okay, but unfortunately, as we know from telomere biology, our cells have a limited number of times that they can divide, a limited number of ride tickets, and as a result, when you turn like 45, 50 years old, because of the accelerated telomere shortening, your cells, your reserve cells, are already suffering from telomeres that are so short they can no longer divide. And so your killed frontline cells sit there. They don't get pushed out of the way, and they collect, and that's what liver cirrhosis is, okay? And so you get a lot of these dead cells in your liver and stuff, and because there's no longer any cells to kick them out of the way and replace them. So I wish more 20-year-olds knew about that because it's not fixable yet. I mean, I'll fix it. I'll make it so everybody can drink as much as they want and never have to worry about it. But I'm not there yet. Okay,
Yeah.
It's still quite a lot of research and expensive research too.
Yeah,
But it'll come because that's my life's mission. Yeah. So again, any toxins of any kind that kill cells in your body are going to accelerate aging simply because other cells are going to have to divide to replace those killed cells. And that causes telomere shortening, which you don't observe until way, way longer. And let me just use one more example of a genetic perspective. Some people have muscle cells that divide a lot more rapidly than normal because the muscle cells die more frequently, and so they have to replace those muscle cells by having reserve cells divide to replace them. And that's muscular dystrophy. That's what muscular dystrophy is. So people that have the mutation to the dystrophin gene, they're going to suffer from weakened muscles and die from it too because of the accelerated telomere shortening. And that is by far one of the top things on my list to fix with lengthening telomeres. I'm hoping that someday anybody that has muscular dystrophy can live a normal life because they will constantly be able to replace their killed cells. Their cells will still die, but so what? Okay, as long as there's other cells to replace them. And there's a ton of diseases like chronic kidney disease, CIDP, multiple sclerosis. All those things come under the same head, including Alzheimer's. I have a clinical study trying to get underway right now for treating Alzheimer's by lengthening telomeres. Yeah. So yeah, when you're young, be aware of the fact that someday you're going to be old. But again, keep life fun. You don't need to smoke to have fun. You don't need to drink to have fun. I love living. I've had a very fun life. I've loved every minute of it, but I never smoked and I never drank. I never drank excessively. In fact, I found a day when I decided drinking was not my thing. And even though I never was an alcoholic, I quit drinking over 25 years ago and never missed it whatsoever.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Okay, well, while we're talking about the insides of our body, how come all of the stuff is marketed anti-aging wise towards what our skin looks like and not all what's going on in the inside? I mean, I can't tell you how many ads I get to like deal with my crow's feet or my underbags or my wrinkles or all my things.
Because that's the biggest market. I mean, more people
Vanity
are more concerned about their appearance to attract the opposite sex, or sometimes the same sex,
or the same sex. Yeah, I was
Yeah,
gonna say.
that's what I said. And, but it's all comes down to that. And so whether your lifespan is gonna be shortened from other things, other parts of your body having aging, becomes irrelevant to most people until they actually get to that point where they're actually suffering from age-related illnesses and stuff like that. But since aging is a constantly changing thing, okay,
Yeah.
and I have YouTube videos where I explain how telomere length actually controls that. Um, but it's the vanity. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to places like, especially South Korea, okay, and I walk down the street and I see, like, it seems like 20% of everybody is got bandages on their face because of plastic surgery and stuff like that.
Oh my
They have
goodness.
done to make themselves look younger,
Yeah.
but they probably drink and smoke and all that kind of stuff because they don't care about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
They're dealing with the accelerated aging in their skin, because smoking definitely accelerates the aging of your skin, uh,
Yeah.
and they're probably dealing with that by plastic surgery instead of quitting smoking.
All right. Well, I've got two questions for you. I've got a bonus one that I am selfishly wanting to know the answer for. But before we get to that, what are the challenges in accurately measuring telomere length in a clinical setting, and how reliable are the commercially available telomere lengthening tests for predicting individual longevity?
I am a very strong believer in the fact that telomere length affects aging, but the technique, I'm either the inventor or co-inventor of almost every telomere length measurement protocol there is, and also every method of measuring for telomerase activity that there is.
Yeah.
But the ones that really work are super, super expensive. I mean, we do telomere length measurements here in my company here, but it essentially costs us like $10,000 to do one
Gosh,
telomere length measurement.
that's a
The
lot.
ones that are commercially available are the ones that are inexpensive and inconsistent and don't work. I would say the best thing anybody could do is measure the percent of telomeres that are short. And there's only
Mm.
one company I know of that does that, and that's LifeLength, a company called LifeLength in Spain, because it's easier to measure the shortest, critically shortest telomeres, and it's easier to get a consistent result by doing that. And it turns out the critically short telomeres are the most important ones to deal with anyway, because at least, when I was measuring that, talking about that Tug-of-War earlier, about how you put people on the opposite side of the uh, Tug-of-War to actually lengthen telomeres. What I didn't mention was that the shorter telomeres get, the fewer numbers there are of people on the side pulling to shorten. It's like in my books and some videos, I talk about how when you're in the Tug-of-War, people pulling to shorten are falling off a cliff. So
Yeah.
the numbers of people pulling are shortening. So you can actually get the critically shortest telomeres to lengthen, the net result of lengthening being not just not just slowing down the Tug-of-War. It could actually win the Tug-of-War in the shortest telomeres, and that will show signs of age reversal.
Mm.
And so even so something like Telo-Vital has we don't have any studies, clinical studies showing that specifically with Telo-Vital, but we do have studies showing that low levels of telomerase will win the Tug-of-War when telomeres are short. And you have a
All
bonus
right.
question.
I have a bonus question. It's a very silly, very selfish question.
Okay.
Can I give my cats Telo-Vital and will they live forever?
All right. Well, that's a really good question.
Somebody is going to
Okay.
ask this question.
Yeah. No. A lot of people. In fact, I am working on a telomerase inducer for pets.
Listen,
Okay.
stop
So
working for the humans. Let's get the animals going. Let's
I
forget about us.
people spend more money on their pets than they do on themselves. Or
Exactly.
the health of their pets.
That is the
And,
market.
and I believe that's the biggest market of all. And, I hope Touchstone Essentials actually becomes interested in marketing such a product. But we did a lot of studies in collaboration with our scientific board members at University of Texas Southwestern to look at the animals and what animals age by telomere shortening and what don't. And it turned out, surprisingly, that there's very few animals that actually age by telomere shortening. Aging is actually a relatively recent evolutionary event. And so different animals have evolved different ways of aging. But the weird thing is that our domesticated animals are the ones that are aging by telomere shortening. So we have shown, and then some non-domesticated. The only animals that we have shown that age by telomere shortening are humans and some non-human primates, dogs, cats, horses, sheep, pig, and deer. Those are the only ones. So 3 of those, dogs, cats, and horses, are our favorite pets. Okay,
Yeah.
so I, in fact, in the horse world, I think, boy, think of somebody who's got this prize stud that is making them a lot of money. Well, it takes years before people recognize them as a prize stud, and then only a few years later, they're too old to breed anymore. Well, imagine if we could lengthen the telomeres in those, or at least have the tug-of-war slow down the aging process. How many more times that they could breed those animals? Okay, but I'm more interested in my dog, and my dog Dash is his name, and I actually talk about a product that I would like to get developed, which is like a salt shaker that you sprinkle on top of your dog food, and I call it Telo Dash. Okay, and I've been talking about that for I would say close to 10 years now. So we still have to develop that, and that's something that is high on my list. And I even have a project leader here who's 100% dedicated to that, and she's actually working her butt off trying to get this all. The biggest problem right now is finding somebody who wants to market it. Okay, and because I think we can develop it quite easily. Okay.
Yeah.
It definitely has some. So I strongly believe that a pet product would be fantastic. And my dog turns 10 in September.
Sweet
and his
baby.
breed, he's a mini Labradoodle. His breed has an average lifespan of 13. So we got to get this available pretty soon.
Soon. Well, my family dog is a Labradoodle, and I think he just turned 15, so he's out living.
Okay, we need to do it faster than I thought we did.
Faster, yeah, I know. All right, well, Dr. Bill, thanks for hanging out with me today and for chatting with me about telomerase and longevity and living forever and all the things. And I will talk to you next time.
All right. Well, this was fun. I enjoyed all these podcasts so far. All right. Nice talking with you, and see you next time.
See you next time. Thanks for joining us on Up One. If you found today's conversation valuable, be sure to subscribe and share this episode with someone who's curious about the real science behind health.
Have a topic you want us to break down? Send us your questions. We're here to help you separate fact from fiction.
Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and let's keep taking it up one.